Hi, everybody. Good evening.
You're recording, Rick.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. Do I need to go back through our Zoom meeting protocols and rules? I think we're all set on that. Mark, you're there to cut things off
breaking up.
quickly if something goes sideways.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The agenda, could I make a motion? I'd like to make a motion that the agenda be approved as presented.
I
I'll
second it.
second. Oh.
Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hands. Do we have a record of who's seated and which members are here?
I have Arthur. We have a guest, Carmen Vance,
Hi,
Judy
Carmen.
Ortiz,
Hi.
Paul Ramsey, Rick Nassif, Lisa Napolitano, Henry Beck, Linda McDonald, Mark Drozier, and Rich Roberts.
Okay,
Are they all on there?
Yes,
well,
some
Richard,
have their videos off.
yeah. Well, Rich Roberts is our counsel. Henry is an ad hoc member, is that correct?
Right.
Yes,
Ex officio.
Ex officio, okay.
and Kate just joined us.
Thank you, everybody. The minutes of our meeting of February 25th, 2021. Any corrections, changes from anybody? If not, I'll make a motion that we accept them as presented.
I'll second.
Lisa seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, abstentions? Any abstentions? That's unanimous. Thank you. So going on, audience of citizens, anything anyone would like to bring up to us that isn't already on the agenda?
Rick, as a citizen, can you hear me?
I can,
Um,
and we can see you. Thank you.
yeah. I had to go in and sit on the bed because the TV's on in the other room, so I wanted to just bring up my concern. I know that the committee is looking at the issue of minority representation. And as someone who has worked with the town and with various boards for many years, not recently, but many years, one of the things that I think has made Columbia a good place to be and a good place to work is that it is not terribly politicized on all of its boards. And I think the one thing that has prevented that from happening is the knowledge that charter makers some years ago changed the minority representation so it is not the same as the state. And I would hate for to see the town try to go back to that minority representation that is listed as part of the state chartering.
You're
And-
not in favor of us going to the statutory minimums, but staying with the way we are.
Correct. I
Okay.
think it has benefited this town for many, many years. And it has kept it from being highly political. I mean, most of the times you sit on a board, you don't even remember who's what. And as an old adage goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I just wanted to voice my concern about that.
Okay,
Thank
can
you.
someone explain
Thank
to Carmen exactly what we had decided that the last meeting? I mean, there was a two-tier one was like Selectmen, that we would stay with, as I think I recall, as we would stay with the breakdown. But like on the discretionary commissions, we would go to the state.
Yeah, the thought subject to, if I can fill it in, Paul, subject to reconsideration when we go back over everything was to seriously consider staying with our present charter with respect to all elective offices, but with respect to appointive offices, going to the state statutory minimum, because there was a recognition by the commission that it was often hard to fill vacancies from minority parties when they occurred, and that it would be beneficial to alleviate that a bit by having the flexibility that's offered by the state minimums for appointed positions. And that was where the commission left it to take up again when we go back over everything.
What would be your appointed commissions in that, as an example?
They're the ones that are handled in the Article 8, animal control off, well, that's it, the building, let's see,
Open space was one,
right, Conservation and Agriculture Commission,
inland wetlands.
Economic Development Commission, Inland Wetlands, Lake Management Advisory, Recreation Commission, Waste and Recycling Commission, if we have one. And that would be it. The rest of the ones in that article are individuals.
Okay.
Oh, we hear what you said. I had a phone conversation with Carmen a few days ago, and I felt strongly prior to the conversation with Carmen that even if as a group, if we decided on what just Henry just outlined, possibly pushing from my perspective, an individual perspective, statutory minimums. But Carmen made a very compelling, well, I don't want to say argument, but reasoned, we had a reasoned discussion, and I of the same perspective as she is at this point. If anything, it would be the appointed, and we still have a problem filling the alternate positions on many of even the elected boards, but the verbiage she used, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I would probably defer back to that, because she made a very articulate case to me that it has kept having the representations at the levels we have has made us essentially a mostly nonpartisan town. I think we're the better for it. And it was really well said by you, Carmen. Thank you.
I think that's a confusion of correlation with causation. The fact that it's a nonpartisan town doesn't mean that it is that way because of the allocation of positions, as opposed to just the nature of the issues that the commissions handle. There's really very little reason for people to become extremely partisan with the issues that come up in town. And I'm not sure it has anything. I mean, if you don't know who's in which party, that's not because there's a relatively equal number on there. That's because people are not behaving in a very partisan manner. I don't know that you can conclude that that's a result of the allocation of people on the party. But I think that it is somewhat broke, and it's broke because of the combination of two things. One of them is the minority representation, and the other one is the staggered terms. And I know we're going to come back and talk about that. If we could get rid of the staggered terms, then the insanity that results from the combination of those two would be would be significantly addressed. And it always comes up with, oh, well, but then we might have all new people getting elected in one election. But find me one time when anything like that has happened as a result of resignations or whatever. There always are incumbents. But when you mix those two things together, and then you're trying to run people, you're running people who can't win. And because voters, you send somebody in the voting booth and it says vote for any three. If one party's running 3 and the other party's running 2, the party who's running 3 has a much better chance of winning all 3 spots, because most people will vote for 3. And every time they vote for 3, they're voting for at least one of the candidates of the party running 3 people. And the party running only 2 people is losing 1 vote every time. And it just doesn't work.
Why do you say it hasn't worked? Because
It's worked
I think
fine.
our commissions and that have worked well through the years.
Well, you end up with the minority representation, but in terms of if you're the party running who can run a lower number of people, the chances of those people of those people winning are down. It's just arithmetic. It's hard
It's
to
gonna-
explain.
I
Well,
don't,
that's going to happen regardless, Kate. That would
I-
happen
I don't see
irrespective of
that.
whether or not you.
Yeah,
you had minority
I'd like us to
representation or
not get into a debate,
Oh,
a
sorry.
detailed debate about this issue tonight. I
Yeah.
was just responding. I wanted to disclose to the members that I had had a conversation, and I probably shouldn't have taken a position this evening on this. And I'd beg us not to get into a debate this evening. We have other things on the agenda, but I wanted to hear Carmen out. And I wanted to let you know that I had had a communication with her prior to the meeting. And because we're not in a public hearing, I didn't feel that there was any problem having that conversation. So I hear you, Kate.
you.
Listen to everything. I've actually written down everything you said. So, but I'd like to move on from this. If anyone else wants to weigh in tonight, please go ahead. But we're not going to decide anything this evening. Okay.
Okay.
That was audience of citizens. Anyone else? Next up is item 5, old business. Staggered terms on elected land use agencies, which 5.1. Mark, this was on here for what reason? Because it was unresolved and you felt we should discuss it in more depth. I thought we were going to just go through sections 9 and 10 this evening.
And we can, was that over transfers? What was the subject?
Staggered terms on elected land use agencies, ironically.
Rich Roberts put together some language to show how that could be accomplished and
Oh,
got it
that's right.
circulated.
Oh,
Because
okay.
I think there was concern with how would it work, because it has to be phased in. And I think his language shows how it could be phased in, and it's not all that complicated. It still ends up with it being staggered every 2 years, which is advisable because they're quasi judicial boards, and it is a good idea to have continuity, but it takes out the issues where there was concern about people being elected 1 year, but not starting to serve until the next year, which obviously is confusing. And that's removed in this process. So
Okay.
I would suggest that we just move on from that, but Mark circulate the revised language that Rich put together so that it can be reviewed and discussed the next time we're visiting the subject.
That was in the document on Charter Revision Commission Agenda 3921 that was emailed to us, that had the agenda in the first 2 pages. So in pages 10 and on is the input from Rich. And I apologize, Rich, I didn't get a chance to review it before this evening. Is there anything you'd like to say to us about it?
No, actually, I just, when we were having the discussion, it was kind of left, how would this work? What would the language look like? And I've been trying to kind of keep up with some of the issues that have been raised. And respond to them incrementally and send memos rather than, doing a data dump at the very end of the process. So
Okay,
this isn't anything you need to attend to now. It's just kind of responding to, a conversation where it's more than a 30-second explanation.
all right, thank you. Next up then is the Board of Selectmen recommendation regarding section 7.5 compensation for the members of the Board of Assessment Appeals. Their recommendation is essence, leave it the language the way it is, correct, Mark?
No, they feel that compensation for Board of Assessment Appeals should be removed from the charter so that it's not a compensated board. They felt that that would lead to other boards seeking compensation. So their recommendation is to just take it out of the charter.
Okay, we'll take that under advisement. And then the other one about the transfer of funds had to do with the threshold.
Board of Selectmen agreed with FIPAC that if they felt a need to look at every transfer, that's fine with them. So they agreed, just change the minimum from 500 to 1,000 before it has to go for approval.
Okay, we'll just take that under advisement. If we could, I'd like to get into a review and discussion of Articles 9 and 10 this evening. It's gonna take me a moment. I can bring these up onto the screen if it's helpful. Let me know what,
Yeah, it's helpful.
okay. Bear with me, sorry. Okay, is that large enough for everyone to see?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so item fiscal year, I don't think there's any desire to change that, correct?
Rick, before you get going, I got a question. If the consideration that was brought up at the audience of citizens at the very beginning about whether or not we take every budget to a referendum is going to end up changing a number of provisions in these two articles. And I was wondering whether where you wanted to take that up, but whether we should take it up first or take it up after we've taken a look at what we've already got here.
Yeah, I don't want to gloss over anybody who had a differing point on this, but I suspect we're not going to make a change from what our current structure is. There was some talk about it. Lisa had brought it up, and I don't want to poo-poo that, but I think the most efficient way to proceed for now would be assuming that there's going to be no change or no substantive change. And if we want to get into that later, then we'll have to backtrack into the other parts of the charter that it affects. Because we'll have a good, we'll have plenty of time to discuss the desires there.
Very good. I just wanted to make sure that we considered that before you got started, but
Yeah.
I understand. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying.
Okay, and Lisa, I don't want to roll over what your perspective was on this in any way, but I think the most efficient way to proceed is to assume everything is going to be status quo with regard to the way we conduct meetings and approvals. And if we want to get into that, we'll get into it and we'll spend whatever time we need to on that, okay?
I think that Henry had mentioned something about just reducing the limit on the petitions, the numbers on the petition. which might be a nice compromise for that kind of thing.
Okay. Okay. Let's move through item 9, assuming that there's no changes necessary from a change we haven't anticipated yet. Going through, any comments that were given to us by council that might affect one of these? Rich, if you could weigh in on that, it would be helpful. Because I'm not referencing any input. I'm just going through the document itself as it exists.
I have something on 9.5. It's just a technicality. There's a typo.
Okay. I don't think there's anything we needed to change under budget message.
No.
Okay, finance department. Again, I didn't see any need for any change there. Preliminary budget estimates, I didn't see any need for a change there. Mark, you're good with that?
Yes.
So the typo you found in 9.5, Henry.
It's the second paragraph. After review and approval of the recommendations of the town administration, I think it should be town administrator.
Right, you're right.
Town administrator. Though the description of town administration could be more encompassing.
It could be, but we don't have it as a defined term.
Okay.
It's capitalized. It would be better if it meant town administration. I assume it would say the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
But it's really the town administrator recommending to the board, or the fiscal manager recommending to the board by March 15th, and the Board of Selectmen pulled their the budget together, talk to 5-pack.
Okay.
So I think it is supposed to be administrator, because that's what Mark Walter's been busy doing for a number of weeks now.
Okay. We all
Also,
agree with that?
the previous paragraph has the same pair of terms, town administrator or fiscal manager.
Yeah,
So it would make sense that in this paragraph, it would match.
Yep.
Okay, that agreed. We'll move past that. Anything else? I'm just scrolling through the document. This seems to work well.
Yep, 9.6, Rick.
Okay, budget review.
I don't know of a better place to approach this. But here in 9.6, it says that 5-pack may modify the proposed annual budget, including the Board of Education budget and the Board of Selectmen's budget, consistent with sound financial planning. I think planning is really the key to 5-pack. And one of the 2 reasons that I came on this commission, 5-pack was one of them. I don't think that the responsibilities of 5-pack are clearly defined in this charter at all. And I think that 5-pack has taken on responsibility and directions that may never have been intended. And I think that we could spend quite a bit of time on this, maybe not tonight, but I think that we should. I can give you just a couple of, I don't think that 5-pack should be able to cut line items the way that it does. I think that the commissions that we have, to go back to something like open space, which I'm most familiar with, are constituted by people that put in their time and their energy and great effort to come to resolutions on what they've been charged with. And when they come up with a proposal, they make that to the Board of Selectmen. And then it's the selectmen who decide whether something should go forward or not. And I don't think that it should then revert to 5-pack to say, well, we're not going to buy this piece of property after open space has spent due diligence on this property presented it to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen say, well, we think we probably should in this particular example. Then I think it's the responsibility of FIPAC to say whether in fact we have the funds available to purchase this piece of property. Let me give you another example, not to take up too much time, but the Public Works Director, George, came to the town a couple of years ago and said, we need a new salt shed. And it's $500,000. Well, if that was, and I don't know all the details, so I'm just running with this as an example. The Board of Selectmen probably approved that. But FIPAC could have said, this is a small town. We can't spend $500,000 on a salt shed. We're going to give you $50,000. But that's not the intent, that's not the purpose of FIPAC. They could say, we don't have enough money presently. We can budget $250,000 this year and $250,000 next year. But it was the Public Works Department and the Selectmen who decided that this was an appropriate project to undertake. Am I being clear?
I think we understand your position. Whether or not we want to go down that path is something.
Rick, I really think that the responsibilities, the bottom line for me is that the responsibilities for FIPAC in this charter are not well defined. And that in recent years, FIPAC has just taken on more and more responsibilities, and in a way that I don't think was ever intended.
They are the budget making authority in town. That is their title. I don't understand why they wouldn't have that authority to do that. It's on their back. They are elected to make budgets. That's all they do.
Planning. But what the charter says is that they're involved in planning. They do a 5-year plan. It says very specifically in 9.6 that what they do is consistent with sound financial planning. It's not that they should be cutting a playscape out of a budget. They really have no business saying, well, we don't need this playscape, because the Recreation Commission said we need a new playscape, and the Selectmen approved that. What they can say is, we have the money or we don't have the money right now. Maybe we don't have the money in the budget this year, we'll put it off to next year. That's my feeling.
In what way, Paul, do you feel that this hasn't worked well? Because I look at what FIPAC does for us and I marvel and appreciate it. And I don't think that if there's been conflicts, hold on a second. Hold on. If there's been conflicts, I'm not aware of them. And I think that it's been a process that's unfolded smoothly without any need for major correction.
But Rick, zoning doesn't go in and ask for things from FIPAC.
I'm not talking from a zoning perspective.
It's very different for a commission like open space, which is actually involved with money, where you're talking about monies and purchasing.
I don't understand how open space has had anything not given to it that it's asked for. They're getting money and space all over the place.
What you don't know is we went through years with nothing, that no money was ever given to us for years.
But you get money every time somebody does a subdivision. You get money from that. Anytime somebody subdivides land, open space gets that money, gets that 15%.
So, if I may, I don't think that's Paul's point.
No, it's not. I was going to say.
What I hear Paul saying is that he feels that FIPAC's role is not very well defined, but that it shouldn't be to overrule the recommendations of the first selectman, of the Board of Selectmen on funding certain projects. It might be to say, well, look, if you want to fund that project, we're going to have to raise the mill rate. And then the town meeting decides, do they want to raise the mill rate or do they want to take out the playscape? But that's a decision that should be made by the town meeting according to the charter and not necessarily by FIPAC. At least that's what I'm hearing Paul say.
Yes, yes.
And I'm not taking a position one way or the other. I'm just translating.
Okay, I guess, what's the definition of a FIPAC? I mean, I know how they operate. They've done a great job in keeping the taxes down, but what's the definition of a commission such as
In
FIPAC?
theory, it's in 7.3, but there's really not much there. And it certainly doesn't say the job of FIPAC is to make sure we never raise taxes.
No, but they do, I think the townspeople have been happy with FIPAC and what they've done.
Well,
So
that's true, but the townspeople clearly have the right to make changes to what is recommended for the town budget if they think that, they want to take something out.
Right.
So it's 7.3E, it's on page 16.
Okay,
I just put that up on the screen.
having for,
It could also, something could go into the 9.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you, Henry.
Something could also go in 9.6 where Paul is talking about budget review. It could be consistent with sound financial planning and the town's plans or needs as established by the Board of Selectmen and the school board. So that, it basically at that point says that, yes, FIPAC cannot decide to take a line item out. That's the job of the town meeting. They can try to convince the school board or the selectmen to modify a line item or do the change themselves. But if they can't do that, then they've got to plan it in, and the mill rate goes up, and they can make their recommendation to the town meeting saying, if you want to save taxes, let's cut the playscape, let's cut this, let's cut that. And if we cut those line items in this fashion, here's what the mill rate would be. And then it's not done. It doesn't give FIPAC the veto power over what gets done in town, which is what I think Paul is
referencing, yeah.
referencing.
I think it is too. Actually, Article 7.3 says virtually nothing other than the composition. And then it
Right.
refers to Article 9, which is where we came in.
Rick, this is Mark, if I can talk.
Of course.
There's two aspects here. When we vote on the budget, we vote on a budget, but then FIPAC goes back and sets a mill rate. Even though the budget might be an increase, if FIPAC decides to use general funds to remove the mill rate increase, that's their prerogative at the time. So I think the two are disconnected. I don't think just because you approve a budget, you're approving a mill rate increase or
That's true.
decrease.
I don't think that's the point. I think this boils down to the point that Paul was trying to make, and that Kate articulated, was that, do we want FIPAC to have line item veto capability? It seems to currently have that capability. And I think, Paul, you speak that you don't want them to have that ability. And Kate, you didn't take a position, and Judy, I'm not sure what you said. Is this something that we want to dig into as commission?
In my opinion, at the end of the day, it comes down on FIPAC's head what the budget of the town is. And so, because they're the ones that are going to answer the phone calls from the senior citizen that says, I can't afford an increase. So at the end of the day, they're the ones that are responsible for the budget. That, at the end, things get presented. I think it's worked, and it, using Carmen's words, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This town is extremely good shape because of how prudent they've been with our funds.
Well, again, I think Paul's point is that the charter doesn't say
It
that
doesn't
FIPAC
specify.
has the power to do that.
Well, maybe it should.
You may like the fact that they're doing that. Someone else may like it. But it's not enumerated as a power of FIPAC. It's enumerated as a power of the town meeting.
It is enumerated in here, kind of, in that it just says FIPAC may modify the proposed annual town budget consistent with sound financial planning. So it can do whatever it wants with the budget.
Yeah, because that's pretty nebulous.
Because, yeah,
It's a broad power. It's saying you can hear what the selectmen said, you can hear what the Board of Education has said, but you're the ones that have to come up with what the bottom line numbers are. And if that means reducing a line item or taking it out altogether, that's what you can recommend or
So
do.
can we agree that currently FIPAC can modify line items in a budget? And is there a desire of the commission to pursue some sort of change that would take that right away from them?
Well, FIPAC doesn't have to modify line items because FIPAC creates the budget.
No,
yeah,
it
but they
doesn't.
get the information from the Board of Selectmen with the line items and from the Board of Ed. So they do see the different line items.
Oh, I
And
see
they,
what you mean. Okay.
yeah, they can reduce it based on that.
So
I
back,
have
go
mixed,
back to the question. I just want to find out where we stand on this, because either we can talk about it as long as we need to, and I don't want to move past it, or we can agree that we don't want to do something about it. Either way, I'm not going to take a position on that. I'm just asking the commission. So Paul, I think what you propose is taking away FIPAC's ability to take line items out of the budget.
Well, there's that, and then let me just try and say it one more time. When a commission makes a recommendation and the Board of Selectmen approve it, I don't think it is the responsibility or it is the power of FIPAC to negate that. I think that what they can say is, and I think that that goes back to sound financial planning, they could say we can't afford it this year, we'll postpone it till next year. But they can't say you're not going to build this playscape.
Well, they don't really say that either. All they say is there's not going to be money in the budget to build it this year. So that you're saying exactly what you're.
and what ends up
Yeah.
happening is if people want to do it, they pull the money from other places, is what I've seen happen. Do we want to have, I don't know if this would make things more complicated, have FIPAC come in and somebody from FIPAC and discuss this.
Excellent, Judy. That's where I was going to go. If we decide we're going to make a change here, I don't think we should do it without hearing from FIPAC.
From there, yeah.
Because they've got inside experience in the whole thing and can tell us why sound financial planning requires them to be able to do that.
And am I correct?
Because it is broad, I'd like to sharpen up the definition of what they can and cannot do.
I have
Might
a
be
question
worth
for
doing.
Rich Roberts.
Yep.
I believe FIPAC can adjust the total budget of Board of Ed, but cannot line item the Board of Ed.
That is correct.
And they can line item the Board of Selectmen all they want at the moment. They can literally go into the Board of Selectmen budget and say, no, I don't agree that this car should be purchased at this time. Pull that out of the Public Works budget.
But see, that's a real problem because they've had absolutely no input into whether that car is really needed.
But
Well,
my point is, at the moment, that's how we operate. I just wanted to clarify that.
And I don't think we should.
I
Rich
guess,
has-
It doesn't seem like what this says. This says FIPAC may modify the proposed annual town budget, including the Board of Education budget.
yeah, I mean, I was going
Selectmen's
to answer
budget.
that.
They
you
can
know,
modify, they can, but not by line item. They can say you need to take $100,000 out, but it's up to the Board of Ed to decide how they're going to take that money out.
So the question I'd ask is, how is it, there's a difference in their ability to weigh in on line items on the Board of Selectmen budget versus the Board of Education budget?
I believe that's state law. They can't do the Board of Ed. If I remember from my Board of Ed days, they're not allowed to by state law. Am I correct, Rich?
IPAC can act like they're taking out a line item. If they have $100,000 in the Board of Ed budget for balloons, they can take the line item for balloons out of the budget, reduce it by $100,000 and pass it. Once the appropriation has been made to the Board of Ed, they have no control over whether the Board of Ed takes the $100,000 out of overtime and puts it back into balloons. But until such time as the budget is approved, they can, at least convince themselves that they're, addressing line items and managing the, the specifics of the Board of Ed budget. But once the appropriation is made, there is no control over how it is spent.
And
How is that?
Is that
how is that-
distinguished from the town budget?
Yes, it's by 10-222, the Board of Education statute. Essentially, once the money's been given to the Board of Ed, they have complete discretion over how it's spent. The Board of Selectmen budget, I think you get into the, the transfer of funds lines and so forth, in section 913, where, FIPAC does play a role after the budget has been adopted.
Rick,
Just one quick thing is that other than the name, the duties, the powers, the obligations of FIPAC are essentially identical to almost every other town with a Board of Finance. And other than the statute, calling it a Board of Finance, it also is pretty vague as to what the powers and duties are. Above and beyond the kind of discussion you already have in your charters. So, as a general rule, there isn't a lot of detail on the budget making process above and beyond what you have in 9.6 and 9.7.
Rich, how many other towns have a Board of Finance that can't delete line items, or is that not seen anywhere?
I haven't really seen that anywhere because, at that point, they're not really a Board of Finance. They're more like people doing arithmetic.
Rick, could I say something?
Of course.
We forget that part of, I think what Paul is talking about are some of the large items that the selectmen would present as a capital budget. And there's a lot of discussion between FIPAC and the selectmen on things like, can we afford to build a shed, a salt shed this year? And the conclusion may be exactly that. Although George wants his salt shed this year, the answer may be, we don't have the funds to do that. And those kind of items like big playscapes that are 100,000, those kind of things become capital budgets. And there's a lot of discussion between selectmen and FIPAC on those big ticket items. I don't remember having FIPAC go back through a selectman's budget and say, well, in the clerk's office, I don't think you should buy this printer, or you should do this, or you should do that. They're not into that kind of item. It's more related to the big ticket items and capital budget.
It's true. I agree.
Well, so the question is, do we need to change something, or do we need to approach and consider whether this needs to change the way it's currently working? I don't, Paul, you articulate that you feel it's a problem from open spaces perspective. But maybe there's been no similar perspective from any other area within the town.
I'm thinking we should get FIPAC in here, somebody. We could ask Ernie to chime in.
That would be advisable. How
I
about if
think so.
I just.
I agree.
I just think at the very least, you need to better define their responsibilities, because I don't think the charter does at all. I just think you need a little clarification here about what.
Why don't you come up with a perspective, Paul, on what you think that clarification should be? Specific verbiage. It would be very helpful.
Okay,
All right.
okay.
Let's move past this point. Let's move on to section 9.6. Thank you, everybody. 9.6. I'm sorry, 9.7. Public hearings. So for the time being, any thoughts on 9.7 about public hearings?
I think they're fine.
Okay, I'm going to move past this unless anyone weighs in.
I have
Budget-
one thing, Rick.
Sure.
It's just requiring, we all pray that eventually someday there won't be a requirement to put everything in newspapers that we can publish in our website. Do we want to change that so that the charter isn't forcing us? Let's say state statute opens up that we can use our website. Now we have a charter for 10 years that says we have to use the newspaper.
Well, we could just put in or other
Media.
other
Or shall
media as permitted by statute.
Or how about shall be caused to be published in accordance with applicable law?
Fine.
Right.
Yeah, something
And-
like that.
If
Thank you,
if it,
Henry.
if it weakens, we're fine. Or changes.
You've got
I like
that.
it.
Linda,
Thank you.
make special note of that.
I got it.
Potentially that can lower the cost of certain things that different commissions do. I know on planning and zoning, when we have a special permit that we have to consider, really the fees that we're collecting are for the most part just reimbursing us for newspaper publishing expenses. That I would love to eliminate those expenses for our members of the community.
So, it already says, or by other means approved for such purposes by any applicable Connecticut general statute.
Do you feel there's no need to modify this?
Yes, I feel there is no need to modify. I think you already have an out right there.
Okay. Are we all good on that?
Yeah,
All right, let's move on. Budget meeting, 9.8. Tell me if I'm going too fast. I love to move things along. I think you know that about me at this point.
we're doing fine.
There is, I don't think the charter is as clear about the relationship between the annual town budget and the education budget when it comes to the budget meeting. And maybe somebody can point out where I'm missing it. The annual town budget in the definition section way back in Article 1 says it means what it says in section 9.5. In 9.5, we talk really about the selectmen's budget as being the town's budget. It doesn't have any discussion in 9.5 with respect to the education budget. The education budget comes in section 9.6 of the budget review, where it says that FIPAC is going to review the annual town.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Henry.
It said in 9.6, it says FIPAC is going to review the annual town budget, including the Board of Education budget, but it doesn't mean that the Board of Education budget is then included in the annual town budget. And so when we come down to the budget meeting, we keep talking here about the annual town budget, which by definition is just the selectmen's budget. So I think we need to do something with our defined terms here to work the Board of Education budget into becoming part of the annual town budget. Because clearly the budget meeting takes up both, but can't do what is said in C, or excuse me, B, which is amend a line item, because it can't amend a line item in the Board of Ed, and we could just call that out. But I do think maybe in 9.6, but what I like to do is let Rich Roberts look at this and try to figure out how best to draft it in. We may want to say in line 9.6 that the town, the annual town budget reviewed by FIPAC will includes the Board of Education budget, which will thereby be incorporated into the annual town budget, so that somewhere along the line, it's clear that the annual town budget includes the Board of Education budget.
Oh, Henry, I think the way I see 9.6,
Yeah,
it seems
it
to be.
already says that.
It
It already
seems to be
says, yeah.
saying that, you know, the other budget that you're thinking is getting confused as the annual town budget, the Board of Selectmen's budget. So the annual town budget includes the Board of Education budget and the Board of Selectmen budget. And maybe all we need to say as referred to collectively as the annual town budget or something like that.
We can do that, but if you look at, I mean, this is technicality. It really, I'm not trying to change anything, but if you look at the definition section back in section 1.4, it says the annual town budget has the meaning ascribed to it in section 9.5 of the article. Doesn't say 9.6. And 9.5 just talks about the selectmen's budget, basically.
No, the first paragraph of 9.5 refers to the recommended annual town budget consisting of a Board of Education budget. and
Okay,
a
there we
budget with
go.
appropriate
Thank you.
line
I
items.
missed that. Very good. My
Yeah, that was
mistake.
like above the part
We're
that was
on that.
shown, and we were talking about that.
Okay, no, I withdraw my comment.
Okay, we're gonna move on to item 9.9,
But
budget rep.
before we move to 9.8, I do think we have to look at, in that regard, 9.8B, which says that the town meeting can amend the
Yeah.
so-called annual town
Yeah,
budget.
Henry, you gotta talk
Henry,
into your
you keep getting
microphone.
away from your
Okay.
microphone.
Yeah, I'll bring my book in front of my here. It says in B, the town meeting may amend the so proposed annual budget by reducing any line item or agency budget in it. And we have consistently said at all of our town budget meetings that the meeting cannot change a line item in the Board of Education budget. And
But this
so,
seems to say that we can,
pardon?
but this seems to say that we can.
Right, it does seem to say we can. So if we are in line that the town meeting should not be able to change the Board of Ed budget because the statute allows the Board of Ed to do what it wants afterwards, we might change B to say to amend the so proposed annual town budget, except for the Board of Education budget.
But what,
Why
so
not leave
there was
it the
that
way it
whole,
Because Connecticut statute trumps our charter in any event. So it's not gonna change the reality of anything. I don't know that we need to address every state statute and every clause of our,
I'm not asking to
Sure.
address the state statute. I'm addressing how, if I came to a budget town meeting and said, I wanted to eliminate the line item for administrative salaries to the superintendent of schools, this would allow me to say I could do that. And if you tell me, rule me out of order because of the fact that, they can change it after the fact, they could change it after the fact, but our charter says, no, the town meeting can nitpick the Board of Education budget if it wants to. And I personally think we don't want to go there because we would never get out of the budget meeting based on the fact.
Yes, I just don't have the same perspective as you. If the state statute already defines what the limit of our authority is, then our charter can't go beyond that because all of our authority is delegated from the state of Connecticut. So
That's
that
true.
being
But what
said,
Henry's saying is that our charter is misleading.
Yeah,
Right.
it could be
Because it seems to say
confusing,
we can do something that we can't do.
right?
Can you just specify Board of Selectmen budget?
Well, we could
Line
just
item?
say, but based on how things are defined, we would say amend the sole proposed annual town budget except for the Board of Education budget by reducing any line item. So you would just note that you can't do it to the Board of Education budget.
Well, is that what the whole point of the or any agency budget in it is? So that you can reduce the entire appropriation for the Board of Ed without going into the line items?
Well, but it says any line item or any agency budget.
Yeah, I think I would interpret this as saying that you could attempt to reduce a line item in the Board of Education budget, even if it's only doing it symbolically because they could turn around and change it later. And I don't think we want to give the town voters that symbolic opportunity because we all know we've got people that would probably gleefully look to try to do that.
Well, does that mean that at the town budget meeting, you never reduce the Board of Education budget?
No, it just means you can't do it by line item.
Okay,
Well, right now, you can reduce the Board of Education, the Selectmen's budget by line item, but you can't reduce the Board of Education's by line item.
but you can reduce the Board of Education budget total.
But you can
Correct.
reduce the total, and then they choose how to reduce
Right.
it.
Okay,
So Henry's just saying we need to make that clear in subparagraph B.
yeah, but the way he was explaining it sounded different than that. That's why I wanted to make sure I understood it.
Yeah, no, the town meeting can reduce the overall Board of Education budget, but it can't do it line item, but it could do line item for the Selectmen budget. So that
Okay,
he just needs to be tweaked to make that clear.
Yeah, I think your proposed language, Henry, doesn't,
Mine
Doesn't
doesn't
actually
quite,
work. but somebody needs to come up with something that works.
right, mine didn't work. I agreed.
okay.
all right, are we agreed to go
Yep.
that way?
Yeah,
Okay,
Yes,
yeah, somebody just needs to write it in a way that says what you want it to say.
I'm jotting this down. Okay. Keep moving through this. Budget referendum. Budget meeting, referendum, ballot.
Mm,
Anything, anybody?
mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
Laying of taxes. I didn't know that they called it that.
Laying of taxes, that is odd.
An old
I'll bet that goes way back.
Yeah,
Again, I didn't see anything that I felt we needed to address here. Issuance of tax bills. I don't see any need to change any of the thresholds here.
No.
Transfer of funds. This was changing this $500 figure to 1,000. Is that correct, Mark?
yes.
Yes,
Under 913.
I'm not sure, and I couldn't find, but I didn't thoroughly do a word search where we've got reserve fund and capital project defined, but we use them as defined terms here, capitalized terms here. And so we should probably define them.
I didn't follow
somebody-
that, Henry.
You
Well,
have,
if
you have
in
this
the-
in a Word doc that you can search?
Yeah, well, Rich Roberts does. I don't. I think that's what's been circulated, but I guess I do, but I haven't searched it. But it can be, but in the last paragraph of 913, it talks transfers to the reserve fund or within the reserve fund for capital projects must be approved by a town meeting. So we should define what the reserve fund is and what capital projects are.
Mark, could you come up with some verbiage for that?
Or see if
Sure.
it's already in here and we just missed it.
I work, I think it's, are they referring to specific reserve funds or the general reserve fund?
I would think it could be probably the general reserve fund, but that's again where we don't have it defined.
Right, okay.
We need to change the verbiage here to reflect the actual title that we use. If you call it, maybe it should be the general reserve fund as opposed to some other reserve fund.
But there's lots of reserve funds, so
Okay,
we'll look at that, because
Okay.
that's how we operate, is on fund accounting.
so just come up with a perspective by next meeting, if you could, Mark.
I
Do
could,
you feel we really need to define those as earlier on in the charter?
I will consult with people smarter than myself to
Okay,
figure that out.
thank you.
Welcome.
I'm going to move on to annual town budget. Nothing there. Audit is very simple. Verbiage, but budget monitoring. I'm going to probably end this when we get done with section 9 tonight, and we can go to section 10 at our next meeting, unless I'll take a look at how long section 10 is.
Sure.
I'm moving past 916, 917. Public emergency expenditures. Again, I don't think we've found anything that we need there.
I have a point that doesn't fit in any one of these for 9 and just for general consideration. We have had issues in the town in the past about the ability to spend grant funds once they come in. And some town voters have seen this as a creeping type way of increasing taxes by getting a grant that's not part of the budget, and then needing, after we've used the grant to do something with it, have to pick up the expense of maintaining whatever those funds were used to do going forward. And it didn't go through the budget process, and it didn't go necessarily through a town meeting. And there was discussion about, it needs to go to a town meeting when it gets put into a line item or something like that. But none of that, we've have a working compromise, I guess, as to how that all works in town, but it's not in the charter or in an ordinance.
So I guess the
Well-
question is, if we had it in the charter, what would it say? Can we take that up next time?
Yes, we can. I just want people to think about it, because I'm not sure what the right way to deal with it is. But right now, maybe Mark can speak to it. He puts in a grant application at the suggestion of the selectmen or whatever, and the grants funds come in, and they get allocated to account, or an account gets set up, and then the money gets spent, right, Mark?
Well, a lot of times grants are over in the revenue side of the budget. So the expense is still an expense. It's just, are we going to pay for it with tax revenue or grant revenue? So in the budget process, a lot of times the requirement might be that you define, let's say, 4 teachers are paid for by a 3-year grant, that you define that those teachers, half their salary is grant subsidized, so that it's clear in the budget process. Or you've hired 2 firemen and they're paid for 3 years with grant revenue, but come year 4, the full ride's on the town. So that's just transparency in the budgeting process,
Yeah,
where the charter might define it.
Or you get a grant to put solar panels on the town hall, or to paint the chapel, or whatever. But, I do think we need to look how grants fit into the budgeting process.
I
Well,
would-
there's several lines about grants toward the end of section 9.11. And
Yes,
it took me a while to find them because grants isn't a defined term, which I'm not sure it needs to be, but
mhm.
just,
Well, that's where I made my comment.
I knew I read it this morning and then I couldn't find it because everything's so tiny and I'm old. So, but I don't know if what it says, I mean, if that's what happens and if that's adequate. It seems pretty
Well,
specific, but
Well, yes, but there also, whenever this comes up in a town meeting, there always seems to be an argument that we should have had this vote at the time the grant was applied for. Because now we're locked into using the money.
No, Henry, I'm listening to this thinking, I would think that this would be more of a Board of Selectmen issue, an administrative issue, not something that we have to deal with at a charter level. If the Board of Selectmen feels that there's been a problem that needs to be addressed, I would encourage them to address it and not have to build some sort of mechanism within the charter to deal with this.
And Rick, I don't apply for any grants without Board of Selectmen approval. I think what we're talking about now would be, do you want an extra layer of 5-pack approval on a grant application? Because there could be long-term financial responsibilities to the grant.
Good point, but I feel that there's probably enough of a review process and oversight of this in a way that the charter doesn't need to address. That said, if where do you want to go with this, Henry? Because
I'm just introducing it because I know it's been an issue with town meetings. And
Yeah,
so,
I would-
that's what,
I would suggest you also look at 33B3 that talks about, when town meeting approval is required for the acceptance of a grant. It's basically over 1/4 of a mil. Otherwise, it's the selectmen.
yeah, I don't see, well, thank you for bringing that up, Rich. If this is something the Board of Selectmen wants to approach, great, that's their prerogative, but I don't know that we need to address this at a charter level. Any thought from anyone else that we need to dig into this at the charter level?
I kind of agree with you.
I mean,
fine. I have no strong feelings one way or another. I just made the note of it because I know it's been an issue with town meetings.
So it's come up, somebody's complained, we agreed to this grant and now it's going to cost another $100,000 or something that we're obligated to do because we approved that, we approved this grant or accepted a grant.
And we usually get over it and we keep moving on, so that's fine, but it has been a source of some friction, so that's why I raised it to see whether we
That's a
thought
good
it needed
point.
to be addressed.
okay. I don't think I personally, and I'm only speaking for myself, and I don't want to overpower anyone else's view of this. I don't feel that we need to address it. If it becomes an issue, I think the Board of Selectmen has the power and if they have the will, that they can address it.
Yeah,
I could see that if you had the grant of a bunch of land or something, but then it would need to have maintenance or whatever. Maybe you got a big old house. Say somebody gave the town a house. Now you have to take care of it. So maybe there are times when that does need to be addressed. I hadn't really thought about it, but there might be.
The town doesn't have to accept the house, or they don't have to accept the gift either.
It's
Right.
everything in here is referring to funds, not things. So I agree with you, Lisa. If somebody wants to give you something that's a thing that requires a lot of maintenance, that, that would require some kind of discussion. But this particular language is talking about grants as, which I interpreted to mean cash.
Right. I think it does.
I don't know. You know what? You're never going to take away everything that people complain about.
Right.
And if you do, you'll create something else that somebody will complain about.
Well said.
So I'm
That's
willing to, I'm willing to be, told that I just don't understand this well enough. It's entirely possible. But I'm just concerned we're going to make something that's even more complicated than it already is. And I'm not sure we want to.
I mean, they do have it if it's a high ticket item that it has to go to town meeting, right?
Right.
So it kind of, you do have that protection.
Right. Right.
Okay, point taken. Let's move past this if we could.
Yep.
Let's see, it's 10 after 8. You want to just try and tear through Article 10, so we're done with this part of the review process? And then we'll start to circle back at our next meeting and go through the specific recommendations of changes.
You want the real answer to that question?
Yeah, I do.
No.
Okay.
No, I want to have dinner.
I was about done.
How long is that Article 10?
It's short.
1 page.
It's not going to take us any time, and it's short, and it's all kind of ministerial.
It's legal
that's-
mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, pretty much.
Let's tear through, because I looked at it. I don't know that we want to change anything here.
The effective date would be what we just have to add something on the end for the new
Correct.
revisions.
Why do all those effective dates stay there when it doesn't, you can't tell what was effective on all those dates. It seems kind of silly.
Rich?
I agree.
Look at history. They want to know how the history of the effective, I don't know. How long
Right.
ago they,
They're useless because you have no idea what was effective on any of those dates.
right. I think personally, I always thought it was interesting to see, this is when we did the charter.
Well,
Well,
It's kind of like the
perhaps
family
could-
Bible, huh?
Yeah, it's like a
perhaps
family
it perhaps should, rather than say effective date, should refer to the amended and restated charter of 1976 or whatever. It may be prudent at some point, if you're historically wanting to check to make sure that something was legally done 10 years ago, you'd want to know which charter you have to look at.
Right.
That's the reason for the history. It's the same in zoning regulations. You want to know how many times they were changed and at what point in time they were changed, and keep that in the current document. So if you wanted to go back and look at what the charter was on December 25th, 1979, you'll know it was changed as of January 1, 1980.
Right.
Yeah, I don't see any need to change the procedure here.
Yeah.
We're gonna add another
Right.
line here once we make some changes.
Right.
I don't think there's anything we need to change in 10, so we
Good.
did get through section 10.
That was quick.
We'll add an appropriate line at the end of 10.5. So
I think we have to define pre-COVID and post-COVID, because pre-COVID, you might want to look back at all those previous renditions, but post-COVID, nah.
Yeah, good point. So with that said, I think we've gotten what we needed to get done this evening.
Yep.
Anything from the plan for the next meeting is to go through all of the recommended revisions. I'll work with Mark and with Jen to make sure that we present not so much a revised version of the charter, but a list of all the recommendations numbered by their section, so that we can discuss them and then refer back to the charter as it is, as we look at those proposed revisions that And then we can start to debate those, and we'll get through those, in reasonable time.
That sounds like a good plan.
Yep.
Rick, before we sign off, can I ask Rich Roberts, I'm going to put you on the spot, Rich, but how are we doing against the memo that you originally had put out about our timeline? Are we coming up on any timeframes that we have to be making decisions or giving reports by, or we still got plenty of time?
No, I think you still have at least a month before you need to start worrying.
Okay.
So that means 3 meetings.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm
So-
thinking 2 meetings to discuss the revisions, if we can get through them in one, which I doubt. But if we get through them one, great. If it's 2 meetings we need, then we set a date for a public hearing. Once we reach a consensus or agreement about what changes we're going to put out to the public.
So what's our next meeting? Thursday, the 25th? Second Tuesday and fourth Thursday, right?
Yes, I have the calendar here.
Okay,
25th.
That's real paper you hear being turned over. Okay, so March 25th is our next meeting,
sounds good.
At 7 PM.
7 PM. So I'll make a motion that we adjourn, and our next meeting will be March 25th at 7 PM. Do I have a second?
And we're adjourning at 8:16.
Okay.
Okay.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Go eat cake.
Judy was faster. All those in favor, thank you.
Bye.
Okay,
Night.
motion
Good
passed.
night.
Thank you,
Okay.
everyone. Good night.
Right.
Night all.
Good night.
Take care.